Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, we just got done watching the pressers for both Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen at the NFL Combine as the Combine commences this week. And some tidbits to go off of here. Some of the main aspects of it was talking about some of the players that Ballard needs to consider on whether or not he's moving on from or not. Ballard said he will talk with Ryan Kelly shortly about his future with the team. Braden Smith, our right tackle, who, has still been missing because of personal reasons. Ballard still did not go into detail on what is going on. All he knows is that apparently Braden Smith still wants to play, and he says that he is going to work to try to make that happen. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting, Cody. It doesn't sound like there's a whole lot more moves that are going to be made as far as like surprise cuts or anything. It sounds like most people are just here to stay.
He's similar to Ebukam. He mentioned Ebukam, potentially, pointing to him being on the roster in 2025. I know we've talked about a little bit about both those guys. I don't know, Derek. I'm torn with both these guys because I understand when they're healthy, they're both good players. Like, don't get me wrong. But the problem is, Derek, especially like Ebukam, he's coming off that major injury. Achilles injuries are nothing to mess around with, man. You've seen guys who are younger who don't fully ever get back to where they were pre-injury, when it comes to that, right? So I'm a little bit nervous when it comes to that, to pay him all that money, because more than likely, based off of what, you've seen about some of these injuries, he may not be the player he was in 2023. That'll be 2 years ago, so that's a big deal right there for that to pay him. And again, he's on the last year of his deal. And I don't know, just you could save about $8 million if you released him because he's turning 30. He's injured, a serious injury. I struggle with that one. I really do. And then with Braden Smith, I know he's dealing with that personal issue, like you said. We'll kind of see what happens with that. But Derek, he's still getting paid a ton of money. Even if you took the personal issue out of it, he's getting paid a lot. You're going to have to pay a couple guys here coming up in the next couple off seasons, a couple young guys in Will Fries, potentially this off season. And then, when it comes to obviously Bernard Ryman in the next couple of years, you're going to have to pay him. So those are some big contracts. You're already paying Quentin Nelson what you're paying him. So I'm like, do you really want to continue to have a super expensive offensive line when if you did cut him, you could really allocate a lot of those funds towards bringing in outside free agents, specifically in the secondary. So that's kind of where I'm torn on it, is like Braden Smith's dealt with his fair share of injuries the last couple of years as well. So I'm kind of torn on that. They're both good players, but is it time for the Colts to, potentially allocate some other funds towards some positions that they've really been lacking in, such as defensive back, for example, or linebacker, or some of these other positions where they're not as invested in financially? That would make some sense for them. So I'm kind of torn on that. I do think Raekwon Davis needs to be cut. I think that's like the obvious cut, but yeah, I'm torn on both those players because I understand they're good players, but I also understand like you can't just continue to pay your offensive line what you're paying them. You just can't. With all the holes you have on your roster, it's just not a wise move. And it's weird because like Ballard, like you hear about the bargain bin Ballard, he's almost like loyal to a fault with certain players that he does indeed pay. Like he's almost like not willing to move on from them if he might be a thing to consider, right? So I'm kind of torn on that when it comes to that, when it comes to both those players.
Yeah, and now we move to the other aspect of what Ballard and Steichen echoed in his, and that was talking about quarterback competition. We're going to do a video on this at some point this week. Ballard did say again that all options are open for looking for the right quarterback to bring in, re-echoing the idea that this is not just a quarterback to try and push Anthony Richardson. They said that this would be a open competition for whatever quarterback they bring in. Ballard continues to remain hopeful that, this competition will be good for Anthony Richardson. I sure am shocked, honestly, Cody, that they're so adamant on telling everyone that they're so open to quarterback competition when in actuality, all it might do is just cause another quarterback controversy.
Yeah. It kind of depends. Like, is this just like a motivating thing for Anthony Richardson, or are they legitimate about this? Like that's kind of the biggest question mark. Because some people are like, I choose to think that this is just to motivate AR. While we're like, could this actually be a reality? And I personally would be okay if it's a reality, Derek. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Like, ideally, you want Anthony Richardson to be your guy, Derek. But you cannot just give him the keys to the city again. You can't give him the keys to the franchise. Can't make him have the guy that doesn't have to earn the starting quarterback position. So that's why my argument has been, and it's not been a popular argument, but my argument's been, if you sign a player, like, for example, a Justin Fields, that's been the popular name, he goes out and beats AR, look, like, he's not the guy then. If he can't go out there and beat real competition, then he's not the guy, right? And again, you want him to go out there and play, but if he can't even beat the guy you bring in to compete with him, then you already have your answer right there. If the true competition won't truly show that he clearly is the guy, then he's not the guy. That's kind of where I say. So if you have to spend some money to find out one way or another, then do it. That's kind of where I'm at with it. And I know some people don't like that, but I just say, like, that's how you're going to get your truest evaluation, is if you truly bring in some legitimate competition, not just this faux competition that people seem to be happy with for some reason. Like if you bring in, a Daniel Jones, for example, or a Zach Wilson or something like that's not real competition, Derek. That's not legitimate competition that's going to truly potentially push AR. That's not going to push him to the point where I think he needs to be pushed, where he has not guaranteed the starting spot. Because you can say you're not guaranteed, but Derek, we know they're going to give it to him if they make that move. We know that. But if he truly doesn't know, and it's a true open competition, I think that's what it's got to be, man. I think that's what it's got to be to figure out one way or another. That's just my opinion on it.
Like I said, we'll have another video on this because I feel like, again, I could go on a rant on this forever about this particular situation, and we will. Another thing, too, they were talking about continuity. That got brought up a little bit in Steichen's presser. Cody, do you want to take that one on the continuity aspect of this?
Yeah, I mentioned it in the stream, and I guess it's just kind of like, how do you feel about it? I have my opinions on it, but I'm curious what you would think about this, Derek, because I was curious. You've had 2 years now of the same guys talking in AR's ear. You obviously have Steichen, who's calling the plays. You have Jim Bob Cooter, and then you have Cam Turner, the quarterback's coach. And I guess I just struggle with the continuity thing because, Derek, we've seen the Colts preach accountability, or we've seen them preach continuity last year when it came to free agency. It blew up in their face. So I guess the Colts have been so bad about actually using continuity the right way that it gives me pause when they say that word again, because I truly don't know if they understand how to do it the right way. I struggle with that, because I look at this on one hand and I say, you've had 2 years with Anthony Richardson. Yeah, the rookie year, he looked pretty good, but he took a big step back this year in a lot of ways, not just from a playing quarterback, which obviously he very much did, but Derek, the off the field things, the things that he should know, he didn't know those things. And you really didn't have a good explanation for like weeks. He didn't even know why he was benched. So just the communication from the offensive staff, from those guys, was honestly probably some of the worst I've ever seen. It was bad. It was poor. So I sit around and I say, it took them basically a year and a half to determine that he wasn't doing everything he needed to do. And you're bringing that back? Like, I'm not saying go and trade, go and, completely overhaul the offensive staff. What I am saying is I think you can get into your own echo chamber a lot of times when you keep the same guys around, right? And maybe you need a guy that can ruffle some feathers a little bit. And I kind of was hoping maybe with the quarterback coach, for example, they'd bring someone out there that has more of an objective, thought with it, and more can bring a different opinion that maybe hasn't been brought to the table before. But they elected to go with the continuity route. I'm not a big fan of that, to be honest with you. I'm curious what your thoughts would be on that. But I see the way they've mishandled like pretty much everything the last year when it comes to Anthony Richardson. And I struggle to be fine with just keeping everybody around again.
As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Look, the definition of continuity is the unbroken and consistent existence or operation of something over a period of time. So again, that's where you're doing the same things or you're doing things a specific way over a period of time and you're not diverting away from it. So that's kind of what it's been, right? We talk about continuity, talk about we mentioned the continuity in the secondary last year. Did it really help much? I don't really know. Talking about continuity and how you run your team. Obviously, that hasn't been working because clearly you're going in the wrong direction. So there's a lot of things where the continuity aspect of this is, it's not working in Ballard's favor very well, which is why he had to, at the end of the presser, at the end of the year, had to tell everyone that how I did things last year was wrong and how it didn't work out the way I wanted to, and that, some things might need to change. Like, that's the whole point. Now, as far as the accountability aspect of Steichen and the coaching staff to get this team prepared. That's a completely different story from the continuity aspect of it. We can always talk more about that. I've already made my feelings very apparent on the fact that, Steichen, I said it last year that Steichen was just as much of a detriment to Anthony Richardson as Anthony Richardson was to himself. Like he was. Steichen, I don't think people give Steichen enough discredit for how bad last year was handled. I know we talk about Ballard. I know we talk about AR. We talk about the rest of the team, but Steichen is at the forefront of all this. And it is his fault just as much as anyone else's as to why this team is here now, looking to upgrade in every aspect and having to be on the hot seat because Steichen failed to make it to where his team knew the aspect of what to do. His quarterback didn't realize that he couldn't check himself out of a play. And yet somehow, some way, they want us to have faith. We talked about that last year. We even talked about it this year at the end of the year. Is there any faith left? Not really. As far as some other stuff goes, Ballard talked about, some positions in the draft this year that he's excited for. Defensive line is in there. Defensive backs are in there as well. Tight ends, he said that's a really good group. Ballard and Steichen both had great words on Lou Anarumo and the staff that he put together. Again, that was Lou Anarumo that put the whole thing together. Ballard said that they were extremely happy to get Lou on the staff. Says that it's going to bring a whole new look to the defense that people are not going to expect. And, he talked about how, getting Chris Hewitt in was a huge get. So, there's optimism, Cody, with this defensive staff that, they got a good staff in there to fix some things.
Yeah, and talking about the idea of the new defense being very multiple, doing some more things, disguising some things, all that stuff that Gus Bradley just didn't do, like just adding some freshness from a coaching standpoint is definitely good. And obviously talking about the experience that they're bringing, when it comes to the coaching staff, not just Lou, but some of the assistants he brought in as well. So, yeah, definitely great there, and exciting to see, what this defense can bring now, being a little bit more unexpected and a little bit more multiple. So, yeah, that was great stuff. I do kind of wish that they would have asked him about free agency. That was one of my biggest issues. They just didn't talk about it. They didn't ask that question, which I'm like, free agency is like not even 2 weeks away, and we're not even asking a question about that. That kind of bothered me, to be honest with you. And you kind of felt like Chris Ballard in certain ways. Like we got some stuff, like the tough stuff we talked about. Derek, sometimes it's like he gave you an answer without giving you a real answer. And I hate that. It just bothers you, like you just don't get anything. Like
I think what's the problem is like now where everything's under a microscope now when it comes to Ballard and Steichen. You're trying to think if there's some hidden details in there that you didn't know about before. We're kind of in a point now where when it comes to Ballard, we're just eager to get this free agency period started because we want to see if there is actually going to be some kind of big changes to this team because like we said, we can't go into this season with the same group and try to fix things because, we did that last year. It didn't work. And now Ballard even admitted to such. And now you're in a situation where we're wanting to see, well, what exactly does that mean for us? And, so on one hand, we're hearing him say this, but yet nobody actually believes that Ballard and staff are going to actually be able to figure it out. Because, again, we saw it last year. Like, there's nothing to hang our hats on, and this team has just been in such a downward spiral for so many years. It's just kind of we're in like this weird space where, we hear the words that are being said, but it doesn't do anything for us anymore.
we've heard the same crap for 9 years. We're fed up with it. And I think that's where a lot of us are like, he can say all these things. I think it's complete BS, frankly, until he does something. And I'm just fully expecting him to say what he said at the end of the year and then do nothing with it. That's just what he's done. That's the mindset he's put Colts fans in, which is just a bummer. And, when I saw the thing about year 9, I was like, good grief, year 9, and here we are with nothing to show for it. It's wild to me. So, yeah, I think you're right in the fact that, he's been saying these things probably for years, but now you look at it and you're like, seriously, we haven't won anything in pretty much a decade. And you don't have any faith that anything's going to change. So, yeah, it's very frustrating, very discouraging.
Yep. So, that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. Is there any other tidbits, Cody, that you wanted to throw in that we didn't already discuss?
No, I think you talked about it. The kind of the positions the Colts are like in the draft. Chris Ballard said he likes these certain positions. You talked about defensive line, tight end, DB, offensive line. Interesting, he didn't mention running back. I'm kind of interested by that. So what does that mean? Obviously, we know the Colts met with Ashton Genty today, so who knows what that's going to mean. But
it could have just been a case of nothingness, just.
That again, they say things all the time, that could be nothing. It could just be kind of just saying a general thing, and you have
not to mention Steichen both admitted to the fact of was talking about running backs too. So
yeah, you just don't know. At this point. And again, the draft's still a long ways away. Free agency is the most immediate need. But again, we're not going to believe it, Derek, till we see it. And we'll just kind of have to see if something does happen.
Yep, absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. It's recapping what Steichen and Ballard had to say at their pressers at the Combine. Let us know your thoughts if you heard anything else. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. We'll have more content coming from what we heard from this. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.